will be started off by Walter Munk. And for those of you who are comfortable standing, I welcome you to stand and give your seats to those people who would prefer to sit. And here's Walter.
Thank you. I'll try and speak loudly. You voted. I was a great admirer of Chip's, of him personally, and of his science. And I really would like to say a few words about him. He means a lot to me. Interestingly enough, Judy and I were at the wedding of Mary Ruth and Chip in 19, I wrote down the date.
No, 51.
51? And it was a Quaker wedding. It was a Quaker wedding, and they sat quietly for half an hour in the Quaker church, and then Chip said, "I desire thee, Mary Ruth, to be my wife," and she didn't say no. and that was the beginning of a long and wonderful association. Now, he came here we knew each other at Caltech. We both slept on the balcony and the Athenaeum for a while, so we knew each other. He was 5 years younger than I am. And then he came here and as a student, and as you know, he worked on two important problems. The first one was the electromagnetic field in the deep ocean and the solid earth beneath it. And Steve Constable, who was his student and worked on that, will have something to say about his pioneering work in that field. And the second was microstructure, the small structure of temperature and salinity in the oceans, which was a complete mystery before Chip made some actual high-resolution measurements. And Mike Craig came down from Seattle, and he will say a few words about Chip's work in microstructure. And I will discuss Chip's PhD thesis, because he was my first PhD student. And I first wanted to tell you a little bit about visiting Chip when he was a student here. He was working as a fisherman, and he'd gotten himself a small Navy reconnaissance boat, which was supposed to have 5 officers in man, but which he ran all by himself. I'd like to just tell you, it's so typical of Chip. He invited us to come out with him, and we were up on the bridge, and Captain Cox rang the L down the engine room. Then he ran down the engine room, 3 decks, turned on the engine. Then he went up on deck to release the line that was holding the thing. And then a few hours later, Cook Cox, and he loved to cook, provided a wonderful luncheon for us. And he did it all by himself, and he actually made his living as a student by working on the boat. Now, I think I'd like to keep my remarks. We already start this thesis. And it has a very interesting story behind it that I'd like to that I'd like to tell you about. We had, at that time, those oceanographers present here will appreciate that. There was no oceanographer in America or elsewhere who understood what spectra were. Amazing statement. There were plenty of acousticians who understood spectra because they listened to chords. And there are plenty of people in optics who understood spectra because you saw light in color. But the low frequency oceanographic oscillations made people try and observe the ocean as a time series. And until computers were developed, that developed the procedure of recording time series and then making a Fourier transform in an efficient way, there was no oceanographer who understood anything about spectra. That did not happen until after the war. And there was at the time an agreement being made with the Russians that we would not test nuclear bombs in the oceans. And there was some instrumentation in the ocean to make sure that there were no violations. And as the basis of what was acceptable for the violation, for observing, was a pen movement over Esterline angles recording pressure against time. It had to move at least 1/10 of an inch for a certain intensity. It has nothing to do with signal to noise. It was totally inappropriate as a criterion. And Eisenhower, after having agreed to that treaty, went back to the Russians and said he was sorry, he had shaken his hand on the treaty, but he would have to withdraw his own participation because his scientists had given him very bad information. And then a new committee was formed by the Air Force Office of Science Research, of people who had done some work with spectra, and I served on that new committee, and we did a good job. We wrote a report on the requirements that was meaningful, and the treaty was thereupon signed. The man who was in charge of the Office of Sciences, of Scientific Research in the Air Forces, was grateful for that. And he asked me once what we wanted, and I said, I want a B-17, because I've been interested in photographing the glitter of the sun on the water, and the Air Force had a splendid B-17 photographic plane. And then I didn't hear anything more from him. And one Sunday morning, very much like today, he came down the steps here, unannounced, and said, "You still want your B-17? And I said, yes. He said, "You've got it." Very fine. And Chip had come up from Caltech this was the late 40s, early 50s, I think, to become a graduate student, and he came by, said, "Do you have any suggestion for my thesis?" And I said, "You've got it." And that was his thesis of photographing the glitter of the sun on the water. And we chose to do the work in between Maui and Hawaii, between the islands of Maui and Hawaii, in the Alenuihaha Channel, because tradition had it that at some time you'd get high winds in that area. And we set up shop. Chip sailed a boat from Scripps over the Reverie, which had a very good masthead anemometer, and was responsible for very good wind measurements, which were part of the reason why this study was successful. Then, what happened is though that we never had any high winds. We wanted a whole variety of winds. We had plenty of days with low winds, but never any high winds. I remember Chip being out on the referee and me being in the plane every day, waiting for high winds, which were sure to come. The name of the channel between Maui and Hawaii is the Alenui Haha channel. And he said over the radio, Alenui Haha, Haha. I'll never forget that. Eventually we had a high wind, got some good data, and had a, I think was a very successful experiment. Just a minute. I think that Chip had all the talents that were needed for what I consider to be a good oceanographer. He picked daring and topics, but first order significant topics, with some probability of failure, because they were difficult to pursue, and he was not afraid of that. He built his own instruments. He went out to sea to take the measurements, and he eventually interpreted the measurements and wrote up the results. And that broad interpretation of oceanography is the one that I was accustomed to at that time. It was the tradition of oceanographers to work that way, and he was a splendid representative of that old ocean tradition. And I really want to end by saying that Chip was one of the best scientists I knew. Really a good scientist, very modest, but very brilliant, and did some major contributions to what we know about the field. So I've talked long enough, thank you, and I want to turn it over to the next speaker.